Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the beauty industry. Not the one with filters and serums, but the one with crocodile dung, lead powder, crushed beetles, and other horrors that once passed for self-care. Before Sephora, there was suffering. Before glam, there was goat fat. And long before natural beauty was on trend, ancient civilizations were smearing themselves with ingredients that would give your dermatologist a nervous breakdown. So dim the lights, fluff your pillow, and maybe double cleanse, emotionally, because tonight we're scrubbing through 4,000 years of skincare and sacrifice. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Egypt, the land of sand, sun, and mercury eyeliner. If Instagram had existed in ancient Egypt, it would have been filled with kohl-lined eyes, flawless golden skin, and enough perfume to knock out a small camel. Beauty wasn't vanity. It was status, religion, and sometimes survival. The desert sun was brutal. So Egyptians used unguents, thick, fragrant ointments made from animal fat and herbs, to keep their skin from peeling off like a poorly baked pastry. Some of these blends were passed down for generations. Others were tailored by priests and healers, who moonlighted as dermatologists with zero scientific oversight. Unguent jars were often made of alabaster or stone, carved delicately and sealed with linen or wax. They were stored with care, as if they held sacred treasure, because in a way they did. A well-balanced salve could mean the difference between healthy skin and a face that looked like cracked pottery. Eyes, always lined. Kohl, made from galena, a form of lead, wasn't just for looks. It was believed to ward off evil spirits and also functioned as ancient SPF. There was even a superstition that the darker your eyeliner, the more divine protection you summoned. You weren't just doing a cat eye, you were warding off the wrath of Ra. Lead-based cosmetics would eventually destroy your organs. But in ancient Egypt they were considered holy armor for the face. Even children were lined with kohl, not for fun, but for safety. Kohl wasn't makeup, it was medicine, magic, identity. And that was just the start. Cleansing rituals included natron, a natural salt that exfoliated your skin and probably your soul. Natron dried out oils, cleaned wounds, and was also used in mummification. That's right. If it was good enough for the dead, it was good enough for your pores. Daily routines included scraping, rubbing, oiling, and dusting. You'd scrape sweat and sand off with bronze tools, then coat yourself in lotus oil or frankincense extract. You were always scented, always polished, always under scrutiny, from others, from the gods, and from yourself. Hair removal was a full-time job. Body hair, offensive, smoothness, divine. Tweezers, pumice stones, and early sugaring pastes made of honey and citrus were the everyday tools of elite men and women alike. Waxing with tree resin? That's the OG Brazilian, delivered without mercy by someone who probably also handled embalming. Wigs were also huge, literally and culturally. Shaved heads were common for hygiene, so wigs weren't just fashion, they were protection, status, often perfumed, braided, and adorned with gold beads or precious stones. Your wig told people who you were. Even pharaohs had ceremonial wigs. Perfume? Mandatory. If you weren't marinated in myrrh and cinnamon oil, were you even trying? Wealthy Egyptians kept cones of scented wax atop their heads that slowly melted over time. Imagine wearing your fragrance like a candle on your scalp and pretending that was chic. Scent was everything. People judged your social rank by your fragrance. Poor folks went with crushed herbs. The wealthy? Imported oils from Nubia, incense from Punt, even custom blends created by temple perfumers. Cleopatra herself was rumored to have rooms filled with scent experiments. And don't forget face masks. Popular ones included mixtures of milk, honey, and, brace yourself, crocodile dung. For glow, allegedly. Crocodiles were sacred, but their poop? Apparently great for exfoliation. How did this trend start? Someone probably got bored near the Nile. Cleopatra, the poster queen of Egyptian beauty, was said to bathe in donkey milk. Dozens of donkeys were milked daily just to fill one tub. That's the level of commitment we're talking about. Some accounts say she traveled with her own donkey entourage. Others claim she mixed milk baths with honey and rose petals. Either way, high maintenance, legendary results. Beauty in Egypt wasn't about self-expression. It was a ritual, sacred, structured. Failure to present yourself properly wasn't just rude, it was morally suspect. Messy brows could offend a god. Cosmetics weren't gendered either. Men wore makeup, oiled their beards, painted their nails, and scented their bodies. A polished man was seen as powerful. A dusty one, barbaric. Even after death, beauty endured. Tomb paintings show idealized versions of the deceased, forever young, eternally smooth, eyeliner perfectly intact. Tombs were stocked with makeup kits, perfume jars, hair combs, because you had to arrive in the afterlife camera-ready. And there was the social theater of beauty, banquets where attendees were judged not just for conversation, but for radiance. Love potions were brewed with roots, honey, crushed insects. Oils promised to attract a partner, win favor with nobility, or ensure a peaceful sleep. Alabaster skin wasn't only for women. Young men used creams to stay boyishly handsome. Even the priesthood had its aesthetic codes. Appearances mattered when your job included channeling gods. Cosmetic palettes were symbols of elegance. Made from rare stones, carved into fish or lotus shapes, passed down like heirlooms. Powdered pigments were stored in tiny jars with ivory lids, and everyone knew who had the best color blends. Rumors swirled about secret temple formulas, only whispered to apprentices under moonlight. Makeup was stored with such care it was practically sacred. Mirrors made of polished copper or silver weren't just tools, they were talismans. A perfect reflection wasn't narcissism, it was devotion. Beauty rituals weren't shallow routines. They were acts of control. In a world of dust, death, and divine judgment, looking good was an act of resistance, a way to say, I am still here, I am worthy, I am blessed. In ancient Egypt, beauty was order, balance, harmony, known as Ma'at. To be beautiful was to be in tune with the universe, not just seen, but aligned. Because in ancient Egypt, beauty didn't just reflect life. It followed you into the afterlife. Chapter 2. Rome, Glamour, Grit, and Goat Fat. The Romans didn't invent vanity, but they absolutely gave it structure. Public baths, beauty salons, recipes for wrinkle cream, they turned beauty into a public ritual and a political tool. The daily trip to the baths wasn't just about cleanliness, it was about visibility. You entered the caldarium, hot room, opened your pores, then the tepidarium, warm room, then plunged into the frigidarium, cold pool. Then came the scraping. Oil applied, then scraped off with a strigil, carrying dirt and dead skin with it. Think of it as ancient exfoliation, minus the loofah plus a bronze blade. Every step was watched, discussed, judged. If your oil was low-grade, if your strigil was dented, people noticed. And yes, scented oils were a whole category of status signaling. Some were infused with lavender. others with imported frankincense. If your oil smelled expensive, you probably were too. Face masks, definitely. Favorite ingredients included barley, flour, and oddly enough, snail slime. Snails were crushed and blended with honey and rose water, for anti-aging, for softness, for reasons only Roman beauty influencers could explain. Need a tighter complexion? Try goose fat mixed with rose oil. Maybe add vinegar for exfoliation and a ground pearl for glow. The rich could afford strange luxuries. The poor improvised with ash, chalk, or even bits of bread soaked in wine. Smell like wealth? Rub yourself with imported saffron or crushed petals suspended in goat fat. Rome was nothing if not committed to smelling semi-divine with a side of barnyard. Skin tone was critical. Pale skin meant luxury, proof you didn't labor under the sun. Lead-based creams were all the rage. They gave the desired pallor at the cost of, well, your health. Women who used it regularly often suffered from fatigue, digestive issues, and skin that peeled like ancient parchment. And that was just the beginning. Eyebrows? They went in and out of fashion, thick and arched in one era, thin and painted on in another. Some women used soot and resin to enhance them. Others just shaved them off and drew new ones on like arched question marks. Eyeshadow came in a variety of bold earth tones: dirt brown, slightly different dirt brown, and volcanic ash, applied with tiny sticks or fingertips. Eyeliner was made of antimony, another fun, heavy metal you shouldn't put near your eyeballs, and yet, glamour waits for no toxicology. Teeth? Scrubbed with crushed bone, oyster shell, and charcoal. For whitening, Romans sometimes used urine. The ammonia cleaned, allegedly. It also cleared the room. Hair care? A full-time commitment. Roman women obsessed over curls, volume, and blondness. Blonde wigs made from the hair of captured slaves were the status symbols of the upper class. The more elaborate the hairstyle, the more servants you needed to create it, and the more status it symbolized. Some styles required scaffolding, wire frames, beeswax for hold, oil for shine, hairpins longer than daggers. One misstep and your headpiece could impale your neighbor at dinner. Men weren't exempt. Caesar famously wore his laurel wreath not just for symbolism but to disguise his bald spot. Hair loss was a national concern. Remedies included onion juice, pigeon droppings, and even ground mice boiled in oil. Spoiler: none of it worked. Fragrance was an arms race. Perfumes imported from Arabia, India, and North Africa. Frankincense, myrrh, spikenard, layered and mixed until the wearer smelled like a perfumed temple. One Roman nobleman reportedly used so much scent, guests could track him through the villa by nose alone. Beauty manuals were widely circulated. One written by Ovid included advice like, use barley meal to soften your skin, and don't use blush that looks too obvious. The ancient Roman version of blend, girl, blend. Makeup was serious business. Worn in courts, in temples, in processions. Rouge on the cheeks for vitality. Kohl-lined eyes for mystery. A smooth forehead meant leisure and grace. Wrinkles were a betrayal. To be Roman was to groom relentlessly. Gleaming skin, sweet scent, and status in every pore. But it wasn't just about impressing others, it was self-preservation. A woman's appearance could determine her social standing, her marriage prospects, her inheritance. Men, too, were expected to be manicured, not too much, lest they be mocked for effeminacy, but just enough to signal they cared. And that's what it all boiled down to: control. Rome loved order, structure, hierarchy, and beauty was a ladder, climb it, or fade into irrelevance. Beauty was even a military concern. Soldiers were expected to keep themselves clean, shaven, and presentable. Filth wasn't just a nuisance, it was seen as a lack of discipline. Temple priests performed grooming rituals before ceremonies. Public speakers prepped their skin and polished their teeth. Even gladiators oiled themselves before battle, not just to look good, but to make themselves harder to grab. Cosmetics weren't just for flirting. They were armor, tools, language, an entire system of self-presentation layered with meaning. Because under the layers of oil and powder, a reminder that beauty in Rome wasn't just performance. It was politics, it was power. It was proof that you belonged at the top, or were clawing your way there, one goat-fat perfume at a time. Because in Rome, to look good wasn't shallow, it was strategic. Chapter 3. Medieval Europe, Filth, Faith, and Face Powder. Welcome to medieval Europe, a place where the line between health, holiness, and horrible skin choices got really blurry. First, let's set the scene. Baths? Suspicious. Cleanliness? Questionable. Scented oils? Not when everyone's scared of letting demons in through their pores. You see, in the Middle Ages, many believed that bathing could make you sick. It opened the skin, making your body vulnerable to disease and sin. So instead of washing, people layered on powders and perfumes. Rosewater? Yes. Vinegar-soaked cloths? Definitely. Dry shampoo made of flour or powdered herbs? The original no-rinse routine. And if you really wanted to glow, you powdered your face with cerus, a lovely mixture of vinegar, white lead, and sometimes egg whites. It made your skin pale and luminous. It also made it peel and burn, and sometimes fall off, but at least you looked ethereal doing it. Eyebrows? Thin was in. Many women plucked them completely and shaved their hairlines to make their foreheads look taller. Beauty was pain, and also extremely weird. Rouge was popular, but not too much. You wanted to look flushed with holiness, not like you were headed to a brothel. Lip stains were made from crushed flowers, berries, or red ochre. Or you just bit your lips for that just surviving the plague look. Teeth were cleaned with linen cloths, sage rubs, and yes, sometimes even with ashes. Dental hygiene existed, barely, and you didn't exactly book a cleaning twice a year. Arsenic was also on the skincare menu, used by wealthier women to lighten skin. Unfortunately, it also lightened your life expectancy. Pale meant privileged and risky. Pig fat and bone ash were used for concealer. Crushed herbs made blush. Burnt almonds, believe it or not, were ground for eyeliner, the world's most gothic pantry staple. There were perfumes, too, made with lavender, rosemary, and cloves. Not so much to entice lovers as to overpower the scent of sewage in the street. Fashion amplified the illusion. High collars framed ghostly necks. Veils gave an air of mystery while hiding unwashed hair. Girdles and corsets reshaped the body into silhouettes deemed fashionable, if completely impractical. But it wasn't just aesthetics. Beauty in the Middle Ages was spiritual. Cleanliness of body was linked to purity of soul. Ugly was suspect. Beautiful meant blessed, or cursed, depending on who you asked. If you were too beautiful, you might be accused of witchcraft. Too plain, clearly not favored by God. Beauty was a tightrope over a very medieval abyss. Noblewomen performed their rituals in private chambers, applying ointments by candlelight, reciting prayers as they dabbed balm under their eyes. Recipes were often guarded secrets, passed down like spells. Some were practical, others less so. Chicken blood for rosiness. Toads boiled in vinegar for complexion. The line between beautician and potion master was blurry. And men weren't immune. Knights might oil their hair with scented pomades. Priests used powders to reduce shine. Even peasants had their tricks, rubbing garlic on blemishes or soaking their feet in ale. Appearance was identity, and reputation and security. Beauty could marry you into wealth, or keep you out of the stocks. Because in medieval Europe, beauty wasn't just dangerous, it was divine, and sometimes deadly. Chapter 4. China, Jade, Silk, and Slow Poison. Ancient China brought elegance to everything, including its beauty routines. Where other civilizations used brute force or barnyard ingredients, China gave us refinement, and also mercury. Let's begin with skin. Pale complexion, essential. It signified nobility, wealth, and a life untouched by manual labor. To achieve it, women and men applied powders made from crushed pearls, rice flour, and lead-based concoctions. That's right, elegance with a side of slow organ failure. And eyebrows? There were trends. Thin and arched, long and trailing. Even shapes like feathers or willow leaves. Manuals were written about eyebrow aesthetics. If you think today's brow influencers are extreme, try painting yours to look like calligraphy. Face masks were made from mung bean paste, ginseng, and crushed jade. Yes, jade, ground up and smeared on your face for that radiant, mineral-rich glow. Herbal tonics followed, recipes so old they were written in brushstroke poetry, and sometimes included powdered tortoiseshell, deer antler, or dried chrysanthemum petals. Hair was deeply symbolic. It was brushed with fragrant oils and adorned with elaborate pins and combs. Shampoo wasn't exactly a thing, so people used fermented rice water to cleanse and condition. Soft, shiny, slightly sour, like your last relationship. Hair was rarely cut. To do so was seen as disrespectful to one's parents and ancestors. Long, healthy hair was considered a reflection of inner virtue. Lips were stained with crushed flower petals and cinnabar, a mercury compound. Sure, it was toxic, but the red stayed vibrant even after you passed out from exposure. Eyes were dusted with charcoal and mineral powders. Forehead dots, painted temples, and elaborate cheek designs were sometimes added with safflower, saffron, or even ground precious stones. Nails, too, had a moment. Long nails were a status symbol. The longer, the better. They were sometimes coated in gold, dyed with plant resins, or protected with ornate nail guards made of silver. Nail polish originated here. Ming Dynasty formulas used egg whites, beeswax, and colored pigments to tint the nails. Beauty books existed, passed down through empresses and noblewomen, filled with drawings, measurements, diagrams of face shapes, auspicious days for hair washing. Your face was your fate, and your fate was measurable in millimeters. Some beauty guides listed ideal traits for women based on the 5 elements: wood, fire, earth, metal, water. A wood-type woman might favor green tones and narrow brows. A metal type should wear white and maintain perfect cheekbone symmetry. Your beauty routine was based not just on looks, but cosmology. Clothing enhanced beauty too. Silks in layered gradients, fluttering sleeves, embroidered collars. Every gesture became an extension of grace. Even walking was rehearsed. Women practiced elegant steps with small paces, toes turned in, a dance of restrained motion. accessories mattered. Hairpins weren't just functional, they were expressive. A gold phoenix pin signaled high status, a jade hair stick symbolized purity. A silver butterfly hairpiece whispered of youth and delicacy. Jewelry wasn't chosen at random, it followed a visual grammar. Bathing was ceremonial. Flowers were added to water. Baths were heated in stone tubs with assistants standing by. After bathing, women were powdered, scented, dressed in fresh robes, their movements choreographed, their routines semi-sacred. And like all empires, beauty was tied to power. Empresses set trends. Court ladies scrambled to keep up. One dynasty's fashion could be another's scandal. A blush too red, a robe too fitted, and suddenly you were gossip material. But beneath the jade rollers and cinnabar rouge, there was a constant truth. To be beautiful in ancient China meant discipline, danger, and dedication. Your look was your rank, your scent your heritage, your silhouette your script. Because when beauty was culture, politics, medicine, and art, it stopped being optional. It became identity, and possibly glowing with mercury. Chapter 5. Japan. Porcelain, Skin, and Ritual. Precision. If you think rice water and minimalist skincare routines are modern innovations, ancient Japan would like a word. Elegantly and with excellent posture. Japanese beauty wasn't loud, it was disciplined, subtle, controlled. Beauty in Japan was about harmony, between nature and body, between skin and spirit. Let's begin with skin. In classical Heian-era Japan, roughly 794 to 1185, white skin was everything. Pale didn't just mean elite, it meant spiritually refined. It was the canvas of court culture. Women applied heavy white powder called oshiroi, made from rice flour and later, surprise, lead. It gave a porcelain finish, symbolic of elegance and detachment from worldly toil. This white base wasn't dabbed, it was layered. Faces, necks, sometimes even hands were coated. But you didn't stop there. Next came the eyebrows, or the removal of them. Women plucked their natural brows and painted new ones higher on their foreheads. This was called hikimayu. They looked like dark commas hovering in serene judgment. Lips? Small and red, very red. You didn't fill your whole mouth, that was vulgar. Instead, you applied tiny crimson circles or heart-shaped touches to the center of your lips using beni, a pigment often made from safflower petals. Hair? Long, like floor length. Women of the court grew their hair as long as they could and cared for it obsessively. Brushed hundreds of strokes daily. Washed with rice water. Perfumed with incense. Hair was identity, flowing, dark, and deeply symbolic. Fragrance was quiet but intentional. Incense wasn't sprayed, it was absorbed. Robes were infused with layered scent. You literally smoked your outfit over a low fire in a process called kodo, the way of fragrance. The goal? Leave behind a beautiful trail, and maybe a poetic admirer or two. Clothing was its own aesthetic language. Kimono layers were carefully chosen for seasonal color harmony. A woman's sleeve length, sash knot, and textile could speak volumes about her mood, age, status, or romantic availability. Men had their own routines. Samurai might oil their hair, perfume their armor, and maintain strict hygiene to uphold their warrior dignity. Monks shaved their heads, but practiced spiritual cleanliness that bordered on devotion. Even farmers used herbal balms and bath rituals, because in Japan, cleanliness really was next to godliness. Bathing, in fact, was sacred, not optional. From hot springs, onsen, to home tubs, ofuro, Baths weren't just cleansing, they were soul resets. Add minerals, floating yuzu fruit, or even sake. Bathing was meditation. Quiet, steamy, and respectful. And let's not forget geisha culture. Women trained in music, conversation, tea ceremony, and meticulous makeup. Their white faces, red lips, and drawn brows weren't costumes, they were visual poetry. A geisha's appearance wasn't just beauty, it was performance, discipline, and legacy. Throughout Japanese history, beauty was never casual. It was layered, measured, studied, influenced by Zen, shaped by poetry, rooted in respect. To look beautiful was not to be noticed, it was to be correct, it was grace in motion, and sometimes it was powdered with lead. Yes, beauty was turmeric, sandalwood, ghee, and sometimes a boiled herb paste that smelled like a foot. But it was sacred. Chapter 6. Beauty in Ancient India, Turmeric, Kajal, and the Glow of the Gods. Before there were serums and sheet masks, there was India, a civilization that turned skincare into sacred ritual, and beauty into a branch of medicine. A place where your glow wasn't just admired, it was auspicious, sacred, weaponized. Let's begin with the holy trinity of Indian glow. Turmeric, sandalwood, and ghee. Turmeric wasn't just a spice, it was a cleanser, a healer, a spiritual antibiotic, and a pre-wedding essential. Brides, and sometimes very patient grooms, were slathered in haldi paste before marriage. Turmeric, chickpea flour, yogurt, rose water, maybe a few whispered mantras for long life and tight pores. The ritual wasn't just skincare, it was protection, a spiritual shield and exfoliant in one. Yellow fingers meant a wedding was near, or at the very least that someone's grandmother had taken over. Sandalwood was fragrance and function. Ground into fine paste and applied to the forehead, cheeks, or chest, it cooled the skin, banished blemishes, and made you smell like a temple had personally approved your T-zone. It was a favorite of monks, queens, and that one cousin who always showed up looking suspiciously dewy at 7 a.m. Ghee, glorious, golden, clarified butter, was massaged into skin, lips, hair, heels, and sometimes accidentally eaten mid-routine. Rich in fatty acids, blessed in fire ceremonies and whispered over in kitchens, it was both moisturizer and memory. Your grandmother probably put it on everything. Parathas, cracked heels, and your confidence. But skincare didn't exist in isolation. It was tied to Ayurveda, a system that saw beauty as an extension of health, and health as a dance between elements. You weren't just oily. You were a pitta type overheating under emotional pressure. Time to drink some neem juice, chant a mantra, apply aloe, and cancel your fire rituals until your rash calms down. Multani Mitti, Fuller's Earth, was a cooling clay mask applied in summer to absorb oil and purify the skin. Basically the ancient subcontinent's answer to the modern detox peel. Teenagers used it for acne. Elders used it for everything. Mixed with rose water, it gave you the matte finish of a porcelain teacup and the dignity of a clay warrior. Kajal wasn't optional, it was elemental. Babies wore it to ward off evil spirits. Dancers wore it to frame their expressions. Warriors wore it under their eyes for glare reduction and intimidation. It was made from soot, collected by holding a silver spoon over a flame, mixed with castor oil, and cooled into a thick black salve. Applied with a stick or a finger, or the same hand that had just fed you lentils. No mirrors needed, just vibes. Hair oiling wasn't a chore, it was a ceremony. Mothers massaged oil into their daughters' scalps in slow, circular motions, as if stirring wisdom directly into their roots. Oils were infused with hibiscus for shine, amla for strength, neem for scalp health, or just whatever herbs your aunt insisted worked because her skin looked fine in college. You sat on a stool, you wore an old t-shirt, and for 30 minutes you were royalty. Henna was everywhere, palms, feet, fingertips, hair, mixed with tea or coffee for richness. Left overnight for deep color, designs weren't random, they told stories. Love, fertility, festivals, protection. Your palms were a manuscript of meaning, and if your new henna design looked like a nervous squirrel, that was fine too. Beauty wasn't about perfection, it was about ritual. Perfume wasn't sprayed, it was dabbed. Attars, distilled oils of rose, jasmine, vetiver, saffron, were kept in tiny vials, rubbed into pulse points, necks, and scarf edges. You smelled like a garden having a mystical epiphany. It wasn't about masking scent, it was about becoming one with it. Mirrorless grooming was an art. You learned to braid your hair by feel, to apply eyeliner with the same finger that hushed a crying baby. You didn't contour, you invoked symmetry. You weren't aiming for perfect cheekbones. You were trying to maintain harmony with the cosmos. Threading existed too, twisting a cotton thread between the fingers to pluck facial hair with mathematical precision. Women practiced it in courtyards, under neem trees, while giving life advice or yelling at siblings. The pain was sharp, short, and spiritually cleansing. Tooth care, miswak sticks, neem twigs, herbal powders, you brushed with plants that doubled as breath fresheners, antiseptics, and low-key tree worship. Skincare masks included crushed almonds and milk for glow, saffron and honey for tone, gram flour and turmeric for detox, and sometimes mashed banana if you were desperate or had overripe fruit. And then there was ritual bathing, not a quick rinse but a spiritual reset. With water infused with rose petals, tulsi or camphor, and prayers chanted under your breath. You didn't just clean the body, you calmed the soul. Because in ancient India, beauty wasn't luxury. It was alignment. It was cleanliness, divinity, discipline. You weren't trying to look hot. You were trying to look harmonious enough to be reincarnated into an even better skincare routine next time. So, if your turmeric stained your clothes, or your kajal smudged into a bold black halo, it didn't matter. You were sacred and radiant, and possibly glowing with a thin layer of ghee. Chapter 7. Top 5 Deadliest Beauty Trends that were somehow popular. Let's pause from the sacred rituals and slide into something a little more lethal. Because while some beauty traditions were divine, others were aggressively fatal. Welcome to Top 5 Deadliest Beauty Trends that were somehow popular, a countdown of glamour gone wrong. Beauty hurts, but historically, it kills. Across centuries, civilizations have lined their eyes, powdered their cheeks, and poisoned their way to radiance using substances that would horrify any modern chemist and most funeral directors. So here it is, a countdown of history's most glamorous death traps, because nothing says, "I feel pretty," like neurological damage and slow organ failure. 1. Cyrus, the original face melt. Used in Renaissance and Victorian Europe. Key ingredients: white lead plus vinegar equals complexion plus catastrophe. Cyrus was a white face paint worn by women, and some men, to achieve that coveted ghost floating near the chandelier look. It promised flawlessness, but delivered skin rot, paralysis, and eventual death. Users applied layer upon layer until their faces glowed like polished bone. Unfortunately, lead seeps into the bloodstream, causes the skin to peel, and gives you that permanent dying noblewoman in Act 3 aesthetic. Fun fact, Queen Elizabeth I wore so much ceruse that her face was described as chalky enough to write on. Romantic. 2. Belladonna, for eyes that whispered death is coming. Used in Renaissance Italy. Key ingredient, deadly nightshade. Belladonna, beautiful woman, was used to dilate pupils, creating a wide-eyed, luminous gaze that screamed innocence, seduction, and maybe imminent cardiac arrest. It worked by disrupting the nervous system, causing blurred vision, hallucinations, and, in high doses, death. It also made it very hard to see, so women stumbled around, bumping into things like elegant zombies, but fashionable ones. Bonus, some also used it in eye drops, because who needs retinas when you have romance? 3. Radium, glow-up gone nuclear. Used in early 20th century Europe and USA. Key ingredient, radium. Yes, actual radioactive material. When radium was first discovered, people got excited, like too excited. It was put in water, toothpaste, lipstick, and facial creams. You weren't just glowing, metaphorically, you were literally radioactive. Women bought radium powders that promised eternal youth and radiant skin. They got bone cancer, tumors, and glowing jawbones instead. One beauty ad claimed, "You will sparkle with vitality." It failed to mention the casket upgrade. 4. Arsenic wafers. Snackable death for a flawless finish. Used in Victorian Europe. Key ingredient, arsenic, delicious, deadly, refined. Sold as over-the-counter complexion wafers. These toxic tablets promise to clear the skin and brighten the eyes, presumably so your undertaker could compliment your corpse. They worked by thinning the blood, destroying red blood cells, and slowly shutting down major organs. But hey, your skin looked amazing while you wasted away. Some women built up a tolerance. Others just died in vaguely radiant silence. 5. Mercury eyeliner, cat eye with a side of collapse. Used in ancient Egypt, Imperial China. Key ingredient, cinnabar, mercury sulfide. Mercury gave eyeliner a bold red or black tint and a mysterious sheen. It also gave users neurological damage, insomnia, and irrational rage. But let's focus on the pigmentation. It was considered sacred, even medicinal. Cleopatra may have used it. So did emperors. Entire beauty manuals recommended mercury for skin whitening, spot treatments, and mood swings, which it absolutely caused. Turns out, applying heavy metals to sensitive mucous membranes was not ideal for brain function. But your eyeliner? Sharp enough to cut through reality. Honorable mentions, aka please don't try this at home. Leeches behind the ears for puffiness. Soot plus pigeon droppings as eyeliner. Urine-based mouthwash, surprisingly popular, disturbingly effective. Burnt almond eyeliner, delicious and flammable. Snake bile facials, for that dewy, venomous glow. These trends weren't just weird. They were desperate declarations in the name of beauty, status, and belonging. A deadly attempt to control fate using powders, potions, and poison. So next time you hesitate before applying retinol or complain about a tingly mask, just be glad your skincare routine doesn't include heavy metals, radioactive elements, or light doses of murder. You're not dying for beauty. You're just exfoliating. Chapter 8. Beauty. rituals that didn't make the cut. Not every beauty trend stands the test of time. Some fade gently into obscurity. Others are buried quickly and deeply because they were dangerous, disgusting, or just plain dumb. This chapter is dedicated to those questionable routines, the ancient world's beauty bloopers, the things history tried to forget, but we dug them up anyway. Let's start with ancient Greece. Sure, they gave us philosophy and democracy, but they also gave us lead-based face paint, burnt cork eyeliner, and eye drops made from white wine and crushed poppy seeds. Yes, wine in the eyeball. Nothing says I suffer for symmetry like tipsy retinas. In Renaissance Europe, some women used belladonna, deadly nightshade, to dilate their pupils for that wide-eyed, doll-like look. Side effects? Blurred vision, hallucinations, and, if you used enough of it, death. But hey, pretty while it lasted. Victorian England had its fair share of questionable moves. Ladies used arsenic wafers to whiten their skin. The advertisements literally promised that you'd glow from within. They weren't wrong. You just happened to glow from organ failure. And how about the 18th century practice of attaching tiny leeches behind your ears to reduce redness and puffiness? That's not skincare. That's a horror movie with a beauty budget. In China's Tang Dynasty, women used powdered lead and mercury to lighten skin. In Japan's Edo period, some products included night soil, human waste, as a skincare ingredient, reportedly used by some, according to folk recipes that blur the line between skincare and dares. We don't know who started that trend, but we do know they should not have. Meanwhile, in medieval Europe, beauty treatments included pigeon droppings, toad bile, and the ashes of burnt mice. Imagine having to explain that routine to your esthetician today. In parts of ancient Africa, women used clay masks that took hours to dry and often cracked painfully when smiled. In the Americas, some indigenous groups believed in tattooing cosmetic designs directly onto the skin, including the eyelids. Imagine your next eyeliner touch-up with a sharpened stick. Even in more recent history, people used radioactive cosmetics, yes, radium, to achieve a youthful glow. Spoiler, the glow was literal. So was the cancer. So, if you've ever felt silly using a sheet mask or jade roller, relax. At least you're not brushing your teeth with brick dust or dabbing fermented animal fat behind your ears to attract a suitor. Because some rituals didn't make the cut for a reason. They were extreme, or ineffective, or frankly, terrifying. But they were all rooted in the same ancient impulse: to belong, to seduce, to ascend, to be seen. Whether with pigeon droppings, lead powder, or glowing cheeks, courtesy of slow poisoning, the world has always tried to beautify itself, one bizarre experiment at a time. Chapter 9. Skincare in the Renaissance. Powder, pearls, and poison. The Renaissance is often remembered as a time of art, music, and genius. Da Vinci, Michelangelo, Shakespeare. But while great minds were sketching flying machines and composing sonnets, people were also painting their faces with lead and trying not to sneeze off their powdered wigs. In Renaissance Europe, beauty was bold. It was theatrical. It was often deadly. Let's start with skin. As in most eras, pale was in. The ideal Renaissance complexion was milk white and blemish-free, a living portrait. To achieve this, women used a concoction called ceruse, a mix of vinegar and white lead. It was applied in layers, giving the skin a ghostly finish that said, "I'm rich, fragile, and may or may not be dying inside." This was more than vanity. It was class warfare. Tanned skin meant you worked, pale skin meant you didn't. But the lead poisoned the blood, corroded the skin, and sometimes left permanent scarring. So you covered it with more lead. Cheeks were brushed with red ochre, vermilion, or crushed berries. Lips got a stain of cochineal, ground insects. Eyes were brightened with drops made of lemon juice or belladonna to dilate pupils and give a glassy, seductive look. Side effects? Blurred vision and, occasionally, hallucinations. Love hurts. Eyebrows were groomed or even completely shaved to give the illusion of a higher forehead, considered a sign of intelligence and beauty. Foreheads were sometimes plucked or shaved to appear longer. The hairline itself was a battlefield. Wigs were fashionable, especially in courts. Blonde hair was prized, so women bleached theirs with lye or sat in the sun wearing paste made of sulfur and other chemicals. Yes, they sunbathed their scalps for science and social standing. Perfume was essential. Bathing? Not so much. People feared water opened the pores and allowed disease in. Instead, they used scented powders, floral sachets, and sprigs of rosemary or lavender tucked into clothing. Bathhouses had fallen out of favor due to outbreaks of plague. So dry shampoo made of starch and scented powders became the go-to. Hair was rarely washed. Instead, it was dusted, perfumed, and braided into oblivion. And let's not forget the beauty patches. Tiny cutouts of velvet or silk, glued to the face to cover blemishes or scars. Stars, hearts, crescents. They were cute and flirty, but also functional. Some women had entire patch wardrobes. For teeth, a smile was desirable, but white teeth were elusive. Mouthwash recipes included burnt rosemary, wine, and even urine. Dentists weren't common. Tooth pain was cured with prayers, pliers, or poisons. Beauty manuals from the period include advice like apply mercury to lighten freckles and rub ground pearls into your skin for glow. The latter is still technically a thing. The former is definitely not. In the Renaissance, art and life blurred. A woman was expected to be as composed, delicate, and ornamental as a still life painting. Her beauty was her value, her currency, her fate. Even paintings of women reflected this. Flawless skin, arched brows, idealized features. Realistic? Number aspirational? Absolutely. So, if you ever feel frustrated with modern beauty standards, just remember, you could be smearing lead on your face, bleaching your scalp in the sun, and poking your eyes with deadly nightshade, all to impress someone in tights and a ruffled collar. The Renaissance gave us opera, oil painting, and orchestras, but it also gave us one of the most extra, high-risk skincare routines in history. Because beauty in the Renaissance wasn't just admired, it was constructed, composed, curated. And underneath the powder, poison. Chapter 10. Indigenous Beauty Rituals from Around the World. Not every beauty ritual came from palaces or powdered courts. Across the globe, indigenous communities developed rich, sophisticated, and sometimes awe-inspiring beauty traditions, shaped by the land, the climate, and spiritual beliefs passed through generations. Let's start in Africa. In West Africa, women of the Fulani tribe wore intricately braided hairstyles, each pattern carrying meaning. Hairstyles marked age, social status, and marital availability. Hair was sacred, often done by family, and treated with shea butter, red clay, and fragrant herbs. These styles were not fast. Some took hours, even days, and the act of braiding was just as important as the result. a moment of bonding, storytelling, and legacy passed through fingers. In East Africa, the Maasai men and women adorned themselves with colorful beads and ochre pigments. Red ochre, mixed with animal fat, was applied to the skin and hair. It wasn't just for decoration, it offered sun protection, spiritual grounding, and social distinction. Some clans mixed in herbs for fragrance or sacred significance. In North Africa, Berber women used natural dyes like henna not only to decorate their hands and feet, but also to signal fertility, protection from evil, and cultural pride. Facial tattoos made with herbal inks could indicate tribal identity, life events, or rites of passage. They weren't cosmetic, they were declarations. In Ethiopia, butter and red clay were used in hairstyling, not just for beauty, but to preserve hairstyles through dust and sun. Some communities added crushed flowers or seeds as symbolic ornaments. Now to the Americas. In the Andes, Incan women used crushed cochineal bugs to make vibrant red pigments for cheeks and lips. Yes, the same bugs still used in food coloring today. They also chewed coca leaves to flush the face and increase circulation. A little buzz with your blush. The Aztecs valued polished obsidian mirrors, flower-based perfumes, and jade face masks. Men and women alike bathed daily, a luxury not common in medieval Europe. Clay masks, volcanic ash scrubs, and aloe vera were common. Their skincare was medicinal, spiritual, and sensory all at once. Among North American indigenous tribes, beauty was practical and spiritual. Some women rubbed bear fat and crushed berries into their skin. Tattooing, piercing, and feather-adorned hairstyles were symbolic of courage, transformation, community, and communion with nature. In the Pacific Northwest, cedar smoke was used to cleanse the skin, physically and spiritually. Feathered headdresses were both ornament, towel, and deeply sacred. Whale oil was sometimes used to protect the skin from cold and salt. In Oceania, Polynesian cultures practiced tattooing not as rebellion, but as identity. The ink was made from soot and sugarcane. Patterns weren't just pretty, they told your entire life story. Body painting with turmeric, ash, or clay was used in rituals to honor ancestors and gods. Fijian women dyed their lips black using soot-based tints. In Samoa, flower garlands and perfumed oils were used not just for attraction, but as a way to express mood, family ties, and ceremonial significance. Aboriginal Australians used white ochre and red clay to paint their bodies during ceremonies, each line and shape a visual language of land, lineage, and dreamtime stories. Designs were inherited and performed, passed from ancestor to body with reverence. In the Pacific Islands, women used coconut oil, not just for hydration but as a symbol of hospitality, care, and sensuality. Skin glowing under the sun wasn't an accident. It was art, legacy, and survival all rolled into one. Even teeth were sculpted, sharpened in parts of Southeast Asia, stained in Vietnam and Japan as signs of beauty and maturity. A smile was never just a smile, it was intention. And across these indigenous cultures, one theme shines through. Beauty was never separate from life. It was embedded in language, land, and love. It wasn't commercial. It was communal. It wasn't surface. It was soul. So, while the West was poisoning itself with lead powder and hair bleach, indigenous peoples were creating harmony between body and nature, tradition and transformation. And many of those traditions live on, in dance, in ceremony, in natural skincare lines rediscovering what grandmothers always knew. Because long before the world tried to sell beauty in bottles, it was painted in clay, passed through song, and worn proudly in the sun. Chapter 11. Beauty in the Islamic Golden Age. Cleanliness, coal, and camphor. While Europe stumbled through darkness and decay, the Islamic Golden Age, roughly 8th to 14th century, glowed with learning, innovation, and yes, self-care. In the Islamic world, beauty was seen as a reflection of divine creation. Cleanliness wasn't optional, it was a spiritual command. Before every prayer, Muslims perform wudu, a ritual washing that includes the face, hands, and feet. Imagine washing your face 5 times a day. That's commitment to glow. Skincare was based on prophetic tradition and herbal science. Rosewater was used to tone and refresh the skin. Aloe vera soothed burns. Sandalwood cooled inflammation. And camphor, mixed with oils, kept the skin soft and fragrant. These weren't just cosmetic, they were medicinal, therapeutic, sacred. Black seed oil, often called the blessed seed, was another multi-purpose miracle. It was taken internally, applied externally, and praised for everything from calming skin to curing headaches. Kohl was hugely popular, for men and women alike. It wasn't just an eye cosmetic, it was praised in hadith, prophetic sayings, for strengthening eyesight and warding off disease. Applied with a tiny stick, it darkened the eyelids and made the whites of the eyes gleam like moonlight. Women often applied henna not only to their hands and feet, but also to their fingertips, nails, and hair. Henna was cooling, antimicrobial, and celebratory. A bride wasn't ready until her henna was applied, dried, and admired, layer by fragrant layer. Perfume was practically a religious duty. The Prophet Muhammad was known to love musk and ambergris. People carried scented sachets, wore fragrant oils, and even perfumed their turbans and prayer mats. In Islamic culture, smelling good was part of being good. There was a flourishing trade in frankincense, myrrh, rose attar, oud, and sandalwood. Some homes even had their own stills to distill perfume. Scent wasn't just about allure, it was about elevation. To enter a room and smell of musk or rose was to bring with you a sense of heaven. Bathhouses, hammams, were cultural hubs. You didn't just cleanse. You exfoliated with black soap, scrubbed with a rough mitt called a kessa, soaked in warm pools, sweated in steam rooms, and emerged smoother than a Persian poem. Bathhouses weren't just for hygiene. They were for reflection, healing, and community. Hair care involved argan oil, henna, cider lotus leaf powder, and amla. Hair was often braided, perfumed, and cared for with as much attention as the skin. Beard grooming was also essential. A trimmed, oiled, and styled beard wasn't just fashionable, it was dignified. Books, so many books. Islamic scholars documented the medicinal and cosmetic properties of herbs, minerals, and oils in medical encyclopedias. Al-Zahrawi, an Andalusian physician, included beauty treatments in his 30-volume medical encyclopedia. Beauty was science. Beauty was study. It was intellect on the skin. Even makeup was systematized. Lip color from pomegranate, cheek tint from safflower, teeth whitened with salt and burnt rosemary, eyeshadow from powdered malachite, all recorded, all intentional, and clothing. Aesthetic and modest. Fabrics were layered for elegance, but the details mattered. Embroidery with gold thread, cuffs perfumed with attar, veils dyed with saffron. Beauty existed in layers, seen and unseen. In the Islamic Golden Age, beauty was balance, between adornment and humility, ritual and routine, skin and soul. It wasn't about seduction, it was about respect for the body, the community, and the creator. And while others painted their faces with lead, Muslims were distilling rose petals into something holy. Chapter 12. Beauty in the Victorian Era. Corsets, cold cream, and consequences. Victorian beauty was elegance on a leash, tightly laced, faintly powdered, and full of secrets behind silk fans and lace gloves. In 19th century Europe and America, beauty was modest, composed, and very, very pale. If you had a rosy complexion, it was assumed you had been outdoors, or worse, laboring. So pale skin was the ultimate flex, and ceruse, the toxic white lead paste from Renaissance times, made a comeback. Women painted their faces with arsenic cream for that whisper of ghost finish. Arsenic water was also marketed as a beauty tonic, promising to improve complexion, increase delicacy, and slowly erode your internal organs, because nothing says Victorian romance like glowing skin and organ failure. Blush, or rouge, was acceptable in small amounts, enough to make you look alive, but not enough to suggest impropriety. Lips were tinted using beet juice, crushed berries, or cochineal bugs, applied so subtly that only the closest observer would notice. Bold lipstick, practically scandalous. Cold cream was the skincare savior of the age. Made with beeswax, rosewater, and almond oil, it was used to remove makeup and moisturize. Women applied it nightly, layering it thick under their chins and behind their ears, hoping to stave off time with rose-scented resistance. Hair was a symbol of virtue and vitality. Long, thick locks were prized, and women rarely cut them. Instead, they braided, curled, pinned, and pomaded their hair into elaborate updos. When hair fell out, as it often did thanks to nutritional deficiencies and tight lacing, it was collected to make false hairpieces or woven into jewelry. That's right. A brooch made of your grandmother's hair was a perfectly normal heirloom. Eyebrows were brushed and darkened slightly with burnt cork or lamp black. Tooth powders made of chalk or crushed charcoal kept smiles bright. Soap made from animal fats and lye was common, though not always gentle. And the corset, the centerpiece of the Victorian silhouette. It shaped the waist, lifted the bust, and squeezed the ribs like an emotional support python. Fainting couches weren't decorative, they were necessary. But beauty wasn't just personal, it was moral. A woman's appearance was tied to her character. Too much color, too much perfume, too much attention, and suddenly you were suspect. Modesty was attractive, subtlety was seductive, and your true beauty was expected to shine through restraint. Despite all that, women still found ways to experiment. Homemade recipes passed between sisters and friends, tips scribbled in the margins of etiquette books, hidden flasks of rosewater tucked into handbags. Because while society demanded a perfect lady, women were still curious, creative, and quietly rebellious. And for all its repression, the Victorian era left behind more than just corset burns. It gave us the beginnings of modern skincare, the rise of cosmetic chemistry, the first true beauty industry, complete with ads, celebrity endorsements, and mass production. Beauty was no longer just ritual. It was routine, marketed, packaged, and, for the first time, available to anyone with a few coins and a mirror. So, while some women were fainting from tight laces and applying mercury to freckles, others were laying the foundation for your favorite drugstore moisturizer. Because even in an era defined by rules, beauty always found a way to bloom. Chapter 13. Beauty in the Roaring Twenties. jazz, coal, and rebellion. After centuries of corsets and powdered restraint, the 1920s burst onto the world stage like a red-lipped revolution in heels. The Roaring Twenties weren't just about jazz and speakeasies, they were about reimagining everything, including beauty. For the first time, women openly wore makeup, not just at night, not just in secret, but boldly and in public. The face of the modern woman was no longer modest and pale. She was defined by smoky eyes, bee-stung lips, and an attitude that said, "I will not return to the fainting couch." Let's start with the skin. The deathly pale look of Victorian days gave way to soft, matte complexions with just a hint of blush. Pancake makeup, inspired by stage actors, became popular. Powder compacts were carried in elegant purses and used with dramatic flair in public, because touching up your face was now part of the performance. Kohl eyeliner was essential, smudged around the eyes to replicate the sultry appeal of silent film stars. Mascara was made from petroleum jelly and coal dust. Lips were small and sharp, drawn into perfect Cupid's bows with bold shades of red or deep crimson. The look was daring, defined, and just a little dangerous. Hair was chopped. The bob became the cut of liberation. Women who had been judged for even trimming their ends now walked into salons and emerged with sleek, chin-length styles, then coated them with pomade and topped them with sequined headbands. Rouge was now fashionable, applied in circular dabs on the cheeks for a doll-like effect. Nail polish entered the mainstream. Even Revlon was born in this era, bringing color into department stores and out of the apothecary. Fragrance also evolved. Chanel No. 5 debuted in 1921, marking the beginning of a modern perfumery. Women didn't just smell like rose gardens or orange blossoms anymore, they smelled like mystery, modernity, and money. The beauty industry exploded. Department stores installed beauty counters. Advertisements promised eternal youth, glowing skin, and the ability to capture men with a single flutter of your mascara. The first beauty pageants began, further anchoring beauty as public entertainment. But underneath the sparkle, 1920s beauty was rebellion, against old norms, against restrictive clothing, restrictive ideals, and restrictive futures. Women had just earned the right to vote. They were earning money, dancing alone, driving cars, and wearing lipstick while doing it. Beauty products became political tools. Lipstick wasn't just fashion, it was feminism. Powder puffs were protest. Compact mirrors were cultural commentary. Salons became safe spaces, not just for hair and nails, but for conversations, strategy, sisterhood. The rise of the modern woman came with a makeup bag. And men? They noticed and panicked. There were opinion pieces decrying the dangers of rouge, the fall of modesty, the corruption of the public space by painted women. The louder the criticism, the redder the lipstick. Even Hollywood got in on it. The faces of Greta Garbo, Clara Bow, and Louise Brooks became international templates. Women in India, Egypt, and Japan copied their eyeliner styles and lip shapes. For the first time, beauty became global. Magazines boomed. Beauty columns taught you how to enhance your face shape, elongate your lashes, or match your lipstick to your personality. Ads told you a wrinkle was a crisis and a powder compact could fix your life. But behind all the glitz, 1920s beauty was survival. After the war, after the flu, after years of scarcity and mourning, women were ready to celebrate being alive. And their beauty reflected that. Bold, fast, joyful, and rebellious. So yes, it was sequins and champagne, But it was also healing, a reclaiming, a face turned defiantly toward the future, perfectly powdered, artfully lined, and ready to dance. Chapter 14. Beauty in the Stone Age. Ash, animal fat, and survival. Glow. Before jade rollers, before kohl eyeliner, before anyone uttered the word serum, there was the Stone Age, a time when beauty wasn't sold in stores, but etched in survival and simplicity. Let's rewind tens of thousands of years. Life was harsh, shelter was primitive, tools were flint. But even then, humans cared about how they looked. Why? Because beauty wasn't just vanity, it was signaling. Strength, health, fertility, worthiness. Red ochre was the first known cosmetic. Found in graves and cave art across Africa, Asia, and Europe, it was used to paint the face and body. This earthy pigment wasn't just color, it was spiritual, protective, a ritual layer between skin and the unknown. It wasn't just about being pretty, it was about power. Red ochre may have symbolized blood, life, protection. It may have made hunters feel braver, or signaled fertility in women. We'll never know for sure, but we do know it mattered, because people were buried with it, carried it across continents, and handed it down for generations. In tribal groups, body decoration marked life stages: puberty, parenthood, partnership, leadership. You weren't just getting ready for the day, you were narrating your story. Hair, cropped with flint blades, styled with clay, or braided with bits of bone or shell. Some groups shaped skulls or elongated heads from infancy, a permanent beauty statement built into the body itself. Jewelry existed too: shell necklaces, animal teeth pendants, stones drilled by hand. Fashion statements carved from necessity and belief. Adornment wasn't random, it was rank, role, identity, and let's not forget scent. People rubbed herbs and animal fats into their skin, sometimes for moisture, sometimes for spiritual protection. Others burned fragrant woods or resins and bathed in the smoke. Even teeth were touched. Some cultures filed them into sharp points. Others dyed them black or inlaid them with stones. These weren't defects, they were deliberate, bold, beautiful. In colder climates, pale skin might have signaled vitality: less sun, less danger. In equatorial zones, glowing, sun-darkened skin was celebrated as health and endurance. Tans were not leisure, they were legitimacy. There were early tattoo practices, too. Sharpened bone or flint dipped in soot or pigment pierced the skin to mark victories, lineage, or personal achievements. Every scar was a sentence in your life's story. And while we can't know every ritual, we know this: Stone Age humans buried their dead with makeup, combs, beads, and pigment. They dressed the body for eternity, not decay. So the next time someone says cavemen didn't care about appearances, remind them. The first beauty products were rocks, bones, and the earth itself. And even in the age of mammoths and fire-starting sticks, humans wanted to glow. Because beauty, even in its earliest form, was never just about surface. It was status. It was sacred. It was storytelling in flesh and paint. And while the rituals may be gone, the instinct, still very much alive. Chapter 15. Beauty in Ancient Mesopotamia: Lapis, Oils, and Sacred Glamour. Long before Cleopatra, before Caesar's kohl, before powdered wigs and corsets, there was Sumer, Babylon, and Assyria, the bustling empires of ancient Mesopotamia. Often called the cradle of civilization, Mesopotamia was also one of the birthplaces of beauty culture. These weren't just cities of trade and invention. They were cities of mirrors, oils, cosmetics, and ritual grooming. Let's begin with the eyes, always dramatic. Mesopotamian women, and sometimes men, lined their lids with black coal or green malachite. Eyeliner wasn't just cosmetic. It protected against sun glare and was thought to ward off evil spirits. Eye makeup, in this world, was a form of protection, identity, and devotion. Cheeks were dusted with red clay or crushed minerals. Lips were tinted using berry juice or crushed carnelian. Women stored these pigments in ornate containers and applied them with carved ivory sticks, ancient predecessors to our lipstick tubes and makeup brushes. Skincare mattered. Women mixed creams from animal fats, crushed seeds, and herbs. Common ingredients included sesame oil, cedarwood, and milk. One cuneiform tablet described a recipe involving mashed dates, beer, and finely ground flour, apparently an excellent cleanser and mild exfoliant. Fragrance was huge. Perfumed oils were stored in alabaster jars, blended with myrrh, frankincense, and rose. Temples were perfumed. So were homes, clothes, and skin. The word for perfume even appears in religious hymns. Scent was divine. Hair care was elaborate. Men often curled their beards with tongs and wax, while women oiled and braided their hair, sometimes weaving in gold threads or beads. Clay tablets document recipes for anti-frizz treatments, scalp conditioners, and even early hair dye. Yes, vanity predates the curling iron. And hygiene? Advanced. Bathing was frequent. Clay-drained pipes, soap made from ash and fat, and extensive wash rituals meant that cleanliness was more than symbolic. It was science. Beauty wasn't isolated to the elite either. Archaeological digs show cosmetics in homes both grand and modest. That said, nobility took it further. Queens were buried with mirrors, hair combs, pigment palettes, and gold tweezers because beauty followed them into the afterlife. The goddess Ishtar, patroness of love and war, was often depicted as heavily adorned, jewelry, makeup, and flowing robes. Her temple was not only a religious center, but likely an influence on fashion, ritual grooming, and femininity for centuries. In Mesopotamia, beauty was layered, practical and spiritual, protective and political. Looking good wasn't shallow, it was sacred. So the next time you open your vanity drawer, imagine someone in Babylon doing the same, reaching for a pot of crushed lapis, applying it with care, preparing for a festival, a prayer, or maybe just another day of living with style beneath the stars. Chapter 16. Beauty in Ancient Greece. Balance, Bronze, and Body Ideals. To the ancient Greeks, beauty wasn't just physical, it was philosophical. The ideal body and face weren't simply attractive, they reflected harmony, virtue, and divine geometry. Beauty was mathematical. It was moral, and it was a full-time commitment. Greek beauty centered on the concept of kalokagathia, a union of the good and the beautiful. A beautiful body signaled a beautiful soul. Your looks reflected your character, your discipline, your destiny. Let's start with skin. Pale was ideal. A creamy, even complexion meant you didn't labor outdoors. It also signified elegance, sophistication, and femininity. Women used white lead mixed with honey or olive oil to achieve this. Not the safest combination, but standards were high and dermatology was not. Men, on the other hand, could tan. A bronze glow was considered masculine, athletic, and heroic. Think of every statue of Zeus or a javelin thrower. Rippling abs, broad shoulders, perfectly chiseled. Greeks didn't just invent democracy, they basically invented the gym selfie. Hair was also a major concern. Women often curled their hair using heated rods, styled it into braids and buns, and adorned it with ribbons, pins, and golden filigree. Hair oils made from myrtle or bay leaves were popular. Wigs existed too, and some women dyed their hair red or gold, considered rare and desirable. Men oiled their beards and styled their hair with beeswax. Shaving became fashionable in later centuries, especially under the influence of Alexander the Great. A smooth, well-groomed man was seen as sophisticated and less likely to be grabbed by the beard in battle. Cosmetics were used sparingly but symbolically. Rouge from crushed mulberries or red ochre was dabbed on cheeks. Eyeliner was made from soot. Lip stains came from wine sediment. Many women also darkened their eyebrows with burned cork or charcoal. But Greeks weren't just about looking good, they were about smelling good. They perfumed their bodies with oils scented with rose, iris, and marjoram. Fragrance was part of bathing, dressing, and even athletic rituals. Bathing itself was a sacred rite. People visited public baths, massaged each other with oils, and scraped dirt and sweat off with a strigil, a curved bronze blade. Cleanliness was seen as virtuous and sensual. And of course, beauty wasn't just for the living. Greek gods and goddesses were depicted as flawlessly attractive. Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, was sculpted with perfect curves and serene features. Her image inspired centuries of imitation, and probably a lot of insecure mortals. Beauty contests existed for both men and women. Yes, the Greeks were probably the first to hold pageants. Some festivals included competitions for the fairest maiden, judged on appearance, grace, and dancing ability. Philosophers weighed in too. Plato, Aristotle, even Socrates debated beauty. Was it objective? Was it linked to truth? Could someone ugly be morally good? Deep stuff? Probably not what your mascara ad is pondering today. So in ancient Greece, beauty was not shallow. It was sacred. It was science. It was societal proof that you were doing life correctly. And while they didn't have ring lights or face filters, they had columns, statues, and poetry, all devoted to the art of being visibly extraordinary. Because to be beautiful in ancient Greece was to be divine. Chapter 17. Beauty in the French Court. Powder, patches, and perfumed excess. If the 1920s gave us rebellion, then the 1700s French court gave us pure, powdered performance. At Versailles, beauty wasn't about enhancement, it was a spectacle. A full-blown production staged daily under chandeliers, wigs, and the watchful eyes of your rivals. To be beautiful in the French court was to wear status on your face, literally. Complexions were ghostly white, powdered to the point of resembling porcelain dolls. This wasn't subtle. This was theatrical. The goal? To appear untouched by labor, age, or sunlight, as fragile as your political favor. That white skin was achieved using lead-based powder. Again, despite centuries of evidence that it poisoned your skin and organs, lead remained the backbone of upper-class radiance. To protect it, women and men wore face patches, little velvet shapes stuck on with tree resin, stars, crescents, hearts. One patch near the mouth was flirtatious. Near the eye, mysterious. On the cheek, coy. These weren't decorations. They were a coded language of seduction and politics. Rouge was applied in dramatic circles on the cheeks, often clashing violently with the white foundation. Lips were tinted red with carmine or crushed flowers. Eyebrows were plucked into dramatic arches or drawn on in exaggerated shapes. Historians suggest some may have used mouse fur as brow filler, a concept that's thankfully extinct. And the wigs, oh, the wigs, towering, powdered, and often decorated with miniature ships, fruit baskets, birds, or entire floral arrangements. The higher the wig, the higher the status. To keep them fresh, they were dusted with flour or starch, often mixed with lavender or orris root. The cost of maintenance was absurd. Some nobles spent hours every day getting dressed. Servants powdered faces and wigs, trimmed false beauty marks, and tied corsets until ribs bowed in submission. It took an army to keep up appearances. Fragrance was necessary, not just because it was fashionable, but because plumbing wasn't. Perfumed gloves, fans, and handkerchiefs helped mask the, let's say, ambient realities of 18th century hygiene. Popular scents included orange blossom, violet, ambergris, and musk. Skincare was less about longevity and more about illusion. Paste thickened with wax or lard could be layered under powder to create a smoother base. Some used vinegar-soaked cloths to tighten the skin. Others simply layered on more rouge and hoped for candlelight. And let's not forget the men. Courtly men wore just as much makeup, fragrance, and flamboyant fashion as their female counterparts. Heels, lace cuffs, embroidered waistcoats. Masculinity was measured in meters of silk. To exist at court was to be watched, judged, admired, and mimicked. Your beauty wasn't yours. It was a political performance. Appear tired or unkempt, and whispers began. Appear radiant and influential, and you climbed. But beneath the layers of powder, perfume, and privilege, skin broke down. Wigs infested with lice, lead scars formed, and yet they powdered on. Because at Versailles, beauty was not indulgence. It was survival by spectacle. Chapter 18. Beauty. Today, filters, freedom, and the fight to be real. We've traveled thousands of years to get here, to the modern world, where beauty is still very much alive, but now it glows from a screen. We have skincare routines with 12 steps, tutorials with millions of views, more lip shades than there are hours in the year. We contour like Renaissance sculptors. We exfoliate with lasers. We tone with fermented plants. And we still chase the same thing our ancestors did: admiration, identity, and the hope of being enough. We call it self-care. But is it? Today, beauty is both empowering and exhausting. One moment we celebrate bare faces and body positivity. The next, we buy miracle creams to erase the very features we just applauded. We live in an age of beauty tech. Filters that smooth skin, shrink noses, widen eyes, all in real time. Apps let you try on lashes, fillers, freckles, bone structures. You don't need to go to a salon to change your face. You just need Wi-Fi and a thumb. Some people look more like their avatars than their reflections. The selfie has become an audition. The mirror, a mood board. And still, we glow with retinol, with highlighter, with hope. The global beauty industry is now worth over $500 billion. That's a lot of hydration and a lot of pressure. We spend more than ever on products, appointments, tools, gadgets. There's microneedling, laser resurfacing, Botox, fillers, threads. The new holy trinity isn't milk, honey, and clay. It's retinol, peptides, and hyaluronic acid. And yet, something's shifting. We're starting to ask questions. Read ingredient lists, demand transparency. Movements like number no filter, number skin positivity, and number unretouched are challenging decades of airbrushed fantasy. Influencers now show real skin, pores, acne, texture, shadows, the human face, unedited and radiant. Beauty brands now offer 50 foundation shades, not 5. Campaigns show stretch marks, crow's feet, laugh lines, Age, people who look like people. And it's not just for women. Men are stepping into the mirror too, not as jokes, but as consumers, creators, and caretakers of their own glow. The line between beauty and identity has never been blurrier, or more honest, because underneath the serums and ring lights and viral challenges, the instinct is the same as it's always been: to belong, to express, to control, to connect, to say, I'm here, I matter, I'm seen. Modern beauty is curated, chaotic, and deeply personal. It's an algorithm and an art form, a business and a rebellion, a burden and a blessing. And still, we line our eyes like the Egyptians. We soften our skin with oils. We tint our lips like Roman poets. We oil our beards like Persian kings. We are still performing history on our faces every morning. So, whether you're slathered in barrier repair balm, or rocking 5 active acids and a hope, whether you're barefaced and brave, or shimmering like a disco planet, just know. You are participating in something ancient, something powerful, because beauty today isn't one thing. It's 100 things. But underneath all of it, still beating beneath the blush, it's just the desire to be seen. And that, more than any filter, is what truly defines us. Final thoughts: glamour, guts, and a side of lead poisoning. So what have we learned tonight? That throughout history, humanity has been willing to do almost anything in the name of beauty. Smear on toxins, bathe in donkey milk, shave their foreheads, crush pearls, wear someone else's hair, or dab on snail slime without blinking. From the temples of Egypt to the salons of Rome, from damp medieval towers to jade-rolled courts in China, the pursuit of perfection has always been elaborate, painful, and, let's be honest, occasionally absurd. We've seen regimens that could kill you, routines that required an army of servants, and trends that changed faster than a TikTok filter. All powered by one relentless idea: look better, appear worthy, glow, even if it meant glowing with mercury. But under the masks and powders and painful plucking, beauty was never just about appearance. It was about class, power, survival. It was how you told the world, I matter. And in many ways, it still is. Beauty has always played double duty, a tool of attraction and a tool of control. To be beautiful was to be accepted. To be acceptable was to be safe. Your scent could seal a marriage. Your posture could secure an inheritance. Your skin, its tone, its texture, could determine your future. We've swapped ancient absurdities for modern rituals, but the pressure, still here, the promise, still whispered, if you buy this, do this, wear this, maybe you'll be enough. What was once ritual is now routine. What was once sacred is now shelf-stable. But even within that, the instinct remains. Not vanity, not frivolity, intention, care, hope. From ancient herbs to TikTok hacks, we're still chasing that glow with old instincts and new packaging. The names change, the tools change, but the gesture, the impulse, the emotion, that stays. So whether you're applying a face mask at midnight or defying the mirror completely, whether you're shimmering in 7 layers of shimmer or proudly unwashed and unbothered, know this: you are part of something older than soap, wiser than blush, a global tradition of trying, surviving, and sometimes laughing at it all. You don't need to glow to be glorious. You don't need to pluck, paint, or prove anything. You've already made it through the day. That's enough. You're enough. So tonight, as you drift off, moisturized, raw, radiant, or real, remember, beauty is not new, but your story within it is. Sleep well. May your dreams be luminous, lightly scented, and entirely free of mercury.